Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Kane spoils Billy and Sally's celebration, Kyle and Claire's situation gets worse, and it sounds like a fight between Audra and Holden is about to break out. September 8th. Victor gives Claire unfavorable information about Kyle as a surprise. Or perhaps more damaging information about Kyle would be more appropriate. Sally doubts Billy's judgment, as many others have done before her and will undoubtedly do in the future. Holden and Audra exchange threats instead of clever comments. Nick alerts Phyllis to Kane's most recent endeavor on September 9th. 3-2. Q had to turn a deaf ear. It's hard for Kyle and Claire to agree on anything. Mariah admits something. However, is it the admission that might perhaps rescue her marriage? September 10th. A mysterious note worries Jack. Kane, the party pooper, spoils Billy and Sally's special evening. Phyllis takes charge because she's determined to make things happen instead of letting them happen to her. September 11th. Jack has a lot of questions, but he really wants Billy to give him answers. Nick tells Sharon a secret. Well, this should be lucrative. Phyllis offers Sally some uninvited counsel. September 12th. Michael and Victor resolve outstanding issues. Intrepid Kane forms a new partnership, despite the fact that his past ones have appeared to be somewhat terrible. Could it be this dangerous and irate woman? Demonstrates Sally's progress to the point that she is faced with a moral conundrum. Once upon a time, she wouldn't have hesitated to act unethically. Don't trust us? Check out how Spectra's ruin not one, but two soap operas. Mariah confesses, Audra threatens, and Kane destroys. Billy and Sally's special evening is ruined by Kane. Holden and Audra pose a threat to one another. Mariah also admits heightened emotions as Mariah checks her notes, truly confesses, Audra and Holden exchange threats, and it appears that Kane spoils Billy and Sally's huge launch celebration. It's almost time. Kane has a lot on his agenda, which is not surprising. Above all, Kane spoils Sally's and Billy's special evening. Abbott Communications' launch was painstakingly planned by Sally. As she led what she and Billy envisioned to be a powerful media organization, a business for the future, podcasts and all, she was incredibly proud of her Dawn of Television theme. Did Kane just call off the launch party? What is causing this chaos, and why? Seek out Kane to form a new alliance by the end of the week. As a resident fixer, he has already attempted to hire Michael. Who might be the other person in this possible professional relationship? Joshua Morrow's character Nick Newman, meanwhile, is obsessed with Kane and his ex's intense focus on collaborating with the multi-billionaire industrialist. Nick tries to reason with Phyllis once more. What do you think Nick will get out of Phyllis when he warns her about Kane's most recent project? We're speculating about a TED Talk about why AI is important and how awesome it is that it can completely and cleanly destroy a company's finances. Since Mariah returned from that work trip, which seems like a long time ago, we have been anticipating this moment. As soon as she landed in Genoa City, she began acting strangely. During that trip, something occurred. Additionally, it had an elderly guy who bore a striking resemblance to Michael Swan, who portrayed Duncan McKechnie on As the World Turns. Although she still visits her daughter, she has recently moved away from Tessa and Aria. Additionally, she won't tell anyone, not even Sharon, what she did while she was away. We're hopeful Mariah will finally tell the world what she did that was so terrible when she makes a confession next week. Teasers, meantime, imply that Victor will surprise Claire with unfavorable information. The specifics of Kyle's contract with Victor may be at issue here, as Kyle is in violation of it regardless of what he says. Jack attempted to get Victor to tear up the document the other day, didn't he? Holden and Audra trade threats. Regarding their interactions while in Los Angeles, these two will not provide specific details. They had been at odds ever since Holden came to town. That is, when Holden wasn't chasing her around like a puppy dog. Given that Holden no longer feels that way about Audra, it is not shocking to learn that the two will threaten one another on Monday. These threats could be particularly painful because these two are well acquainted. Lastly, Sally is faced with a moral conundrum. What is it? And if she makes the incorrect decision, who will suffer? Kane Ashby's reputation as the resident party pooper in Genoa City solidified the very moment he stormed into Billy Abbott and Sally Spectra's carefully planned Abbott Communications launch celebration, where Sally, glowing with pride over her dawn of television theme and visions of multimedia expansion, had orchestrated every detail down to the champagne glasses that shimmered under the spotlight, only to watch helplessly as Kane pulled the metaphorical rug out from under her. His interference, not just petty but calculated, designed to humiliate Billy in front of industry insiders and force Sally to reconsider whether her latest partnership was doomed from the start. For Sally, haunted by the ghosts of Spectra failures in both Los Angeles and New York, had clawed her way back to respectability, and now, with Kane's sabotage, she doubted Billy's judgment as so many before her had, whispering to herself that if Kane could cause this much damage in one evening, what disasters lurked around the corner. Meanwhile, Kyle Abbott and Claire Newman's situation worsened by the hour, their fragile alliance fracturing under Victor's hand as he quietly slipped Claire damaging information about Kyle, perhaps more damning than anything she had ever expected, a legal clause or a breach of contract that made Kyle appear both reckless and deceitful, leaving Claire torn between confronting him or wielding the knowledge as leverage in her ongoing bid to gain power within Newman circles. But before she could make her choice, Holden Novak and Audra Charles' simmering feud threatened to explode into violence, their banter now stripped of clever remarks and replaced with venomous threats that harkened back to their mysterious time in Los Angeles, where betrayals and dangerous games had already set the tone for their animosity, and when Holden's voice dropped low enough to make Audra blanch, everyone nearby realized fists could fly at any second. Yet Kane, busy ruining Sally and Billy's moment, paid little attention, consumed by his own agenda of forming a new partnership, perhaps with someone equally dangerous, perhaps with someone like Audra herself, whose ruthlessness mirrored his need for a fixer after Michael Baldwin's refusal. Nick Newman, having tracked Kane's latest moves with growing unease, wasted no time alerting Phyllis Summers on September 9th, only for her to brush him off with practiced defiance, her ears deaf to his warnings because when Phyllis decided she would chase control, she always preferred to orchestrate outcomes rather than heed caution, though Nick, torn between protecting Sharon with his own secrets and saving Phyllis from herself, knew he was shouting into a hurricane, especially since Sharon had noticed how preoccupied he had become with Kane's ex, his business moves, and his unsettling fixation on the Newman Empire's intersections with Abbott conflicts. In another corner of Genoa City, Mariah Copeland's strange behavior since returning from her work trip boiled over, for she had grown distant from Tessa and their daughter Aria, choosing silence over truth, until finally, under the mounting pressure of her own guilt and perhaps the whispered memory of Duncan McKechnie, the elderly man she encountered during that mysterious trip, she prepared to confess, though whether this confession would save her marriage or shatter it remained to be seen, because secrets, once spoken, rarely knit relationships back together. And while Mariah trembled on the edge of her revelation, Jack Abbott received a mysterious note on September 10th that rattled him deeply, scribbled words hinting at betrayal and danger. Leaving him desperate for answers he demanded Billy provide, though Billy, still reeling from Kane's sabotage and Sally's shaken confidence in him, struggled to hold his own ground, his brother's interrogation only worsening the sense that Abbott Communications was teetering before it even took its first step. By September 11th, Jack's questions multiplied, and Sally found herself cornered not only by Jack's demands but also by Phyllis's uninvited counsel, her sharp words disguised as advice yet laced with ulterior motives, and Sally, now faced with a moral conundrum, wondered whether to heed Phyllis's cold pragmatism, urging her to cut ties with Billy if he proved to be a liability, or stay true to the loyalty she had promised, a choice that tested how far Sally had come from her unscrupulous days when she wouldn't have blinked before pulling the rug out from anyone else. And through all this, Victor maneuvered like a chess master, settling outstanding issues with Michael Baldwin on September 12th, smoothing legal pathways while secretly dangling Kyle's contract violation like a weapon to Claire, knowing that if Kyle stumbled, Jack would suffer, and if Jack suffered, Victor could once again tighten his grip on Genoa City's corporate stage, his eyes never leaving the long game, his vendetta against the Abbotts simmering with every calculated move. But even as Victor schemed, the chaos Kane created rippled outward, Billy and Sally's special evening destroyed, Holden and Audra's threats escalating to dangerous levels, Mariah's confession threatening to upend her world, Jack drowning in questions, Nick guarding secrets from Sharon, and Phyllis determined to bend events to her will, all while Sally stared into the mirror, recognizing that the true test of her progress was here. Would she cling to her old instincts, embracing whatever unethical edge she could find to claw her way forward? Or would she risk everything by choosing integrity, even if it meant losing Billy, Abbott Communications, and her fragile dream of legitimacy? Meanwhile, Kane, ever the intrepid yet reckless operator, prepared to forge his new alliance by week's end, his mind already calculating the advantage of pairing with a volatile woman whose anger matched his ambition. Because if Kane had proven anything in Genoa City, it was that he thrived in chaos, feeding off the wreckage of others' dreams to carve a place for himself. And though many whispered he was nothing more than a spoiler, a saboteur, the truth was darker. Kane Ashby was positioning himself not just to ruin parties, but to decide the future of Genoa City's most powerful players, whether they liked it or not. The fallout from Kane's sabotage didn't just end with the ruined Abbott Communications celebration. It lingered like smoke after a fire, choking every corner of Genoa City's interconnected lives. For Sally Spectra, who had once been celebrated for her resilience, now wrestled with the suffocating feeling that perhaps her entire career had been a string of almost successes derailed by men she trusted too much. First Wyatt, then Adam, now Billy, who in her eyes looked less like a reliable partner, and more like an unpredictable gambler whose penchant for risk-taking had once again opened the door for disaster. And though Billy insisted Kane's ambush was nothing more than a desperate act by a man addicted to chaos, Sally couldn't shake the sting of humiliation, the whispers in the crowd, the way investors exchanged doubtful glances, and how quickly potential allies began to scatter, leaving her to question whether Abbott Communications was doomed before its official launch. Meanwhile, Kane reveled in the turmoil, not out of sheer pettiness but because disruption was his currency, his way of reminding Genoa City's elite that he wasn't to be sidelined or underestimated. And as he mapped out his next move, an alliance with someone equally volatile, he considered whether Audra Charles, with her sharp tongue and talent for survival, could be the ruthless partner he needed. Yet Audra herself was far from eager to align with Kane, as her own storm brewed in the form of Holden Novak, whose simmering resentment over their shared past in Los Angeles had escalated into open threats, both of them dancing on the knife's edge of exposure, each knowing the other harbored dangerous secrets. And as their war of words grew sharper, bystanders whispered that it was only a matter of time before threats turned into something darker. Carl Abbott, already feeling the weight of his strained relationship with Claire Newman, found himself cornered by Victor Newman's machinations, for Claire, trying to prove her value to Victor, now held damning information about Kyle's contract violation, and though she struggled with whether to use it, her growing disillusionment with Kyle's inability to commit or compromise made the decision easier. If she chose to strike, Kyle's credibility could collapse, dragging the Abbott name with it, a move Victor would applaud as he tightened his vendetta against Jack, who himself was unraveling under the pressure of a mysterious note delivered without signature, its cryptic warning gnawing at him as he tried to coax answers from Billy. But Billy, weighed down by guilt and embarrassment over Sally's shaken trust, deflected rather than revealed, leaving Jack to suspect his brother was hiding something monumental. Elsewhere, Mariah Copeland paced the floor of Crimson Lights, her hands trembling as she rehearsed her confession. A confession tied not just to her emotional distance from Tessa but to that haunting work trip where she had met the elderly man who dredged up shadows of Duncan McKechnie. And though she wanted to believe telling the truth would rescue her marriage, a small, fearful voice inside warned her that some truths had the power to scorch everything they touched. And when she finally faced Tessa, eyes brimming with tears, she began to unravel the tangled story of what she had done, though whether Tessa could forgive remained a question heavy in the air. Nick Newman, playing his own balancing act, continued warning Phyllis Summers about Kane's latest schemes, only to be brushed off with her typical bravado. Phyllis convinced she could outmaneuver Kane if she chose to, though her fixation on orchestrating her own outcomes blinded her to the danger of underestimating him. And while Nick confided fragments of his fears to Sharon, he kept the core secret locked away, his silence creating yet another wedge between him and the woman who had always been his truest confidant. As the week marched forward, Victor concluded his negotiations with Michael Baldwin, both men closing the door on unresolved issues, their alliance once again functional if not entirely trusting, and Victor's chessboard grew fuller by the day, his every move designed to weaken Jack and corral Kyle, all while pretending his motives were strictly business when everyone knew personal vendetta dripped from every action. Sally, standing at the precipice of another moral conundrum, weighed her choices with unusual gravity, knowing that if she slipped into her old ways, schemes, manipulations, ruthless plays, she could salvage Abbott Communications and possibly her future with Billy, but at the cost of her integrity, while if she chose to remain true to the ethical path she had tried so hard to walk, she risked losing everything. And though Phyllis whispered venom-laced encouragement to take the darker road, Sally hesitated, haunted by the thought of repeating mistakes that had already branded her reputation beyond repair. And as these dramas unfolded in parallel, Kane stood at the center, a man many dismissed as nothing more than a spoiler but who in truth was carefully weaving threads of influence, preparing to forge a new partnership that would not just destabilize Billy and Sally but send shockwaves through Newman, Abbott, and beyond, because Kane, unlike so many of his rivals, thrived in the ashes of others' failures, feeding on the wreckage to secure his place in Genoa City's ruthless hierarchy. And as September drew to a close, one truth became undeniable: the celebrations, the confessions, the threats, and the secrets all pointed to a storm unlike any Genoa City had weathered in years, with Kane Ashby at its epicenter, smiling in the shadows as the world around him threatened to crumble. The echoes of Kane's sabotage still reverberated across Genoa City as if the man had detonated a bomb at Abbott Communications' launch party, because no matter how hard Billy tried to reassure Sally that they could recover, the truth lingered in every skeptical phone call and every investor who quietly withdrew their interest. And Sally, whose pride had been so fiercely tied to the dawn of television theme and her vision of reinventing media, could not erase the humiliation of watching Kane steal the spotlight, calling the entire evening into question. And though Billy insisted Kane had merely pulled a stunt, Sally felt an insidious doubt creep into her thoughts, the nagging sense that Billy had underestimated Kane, that perhaps Kane had more allies than anyone suspected. And as she mulled over Phyllis's unsolicited counsel, "Cut ties with Billy before he drags you down," Sally realized she was facing a moral crossroad unlike any other, one that forced her to decide whether she would fight for integrity or claw back success the old way, through manipulation and ruthless plays that had once defined her. Meanwhile Kane, unrepentant, moved swiftly to solidify his next scheme, casting his gaze toward Audra Charles, a woman who mirrored his hunger and his volatility, yet any attempt to form an alliance with her was complicated by the storm brewing between Audra and Holden Novak, whose exchanges had moved far beyond witty banter into the realm of dangerous threats, their shared history in Los Angeles now a loaded weapon neither dared reveal publicly, though both were more than willing to weaponize in private. And when Audra hissed that Holden would regret ever coming back into her orbit, Holden smirked, his voice laced with venom as he promised that Audra hadn't seen the worst of him yet, leaving even hardened onlookers uneasy about what kind of battle might be unleashed if the two ever stopped sparring with words and finally unleashed action. Across town, Claire Newman sat in the quiet of her suite with Victor Newman's voice echoing in her mind, his calm but deliberate delivery of damning information about Kyle Abbott weighing heavily on her, because the contract violation Victor had exposed wasn't just a minor detail. It was a weapon, one that could shatter Kyle's credibility at Jabbo, destabilize Jack Abbott's already fragile leadership, and position Claire as a power broker if she chose to wield it. But with her complicated feelings for Kyle muddying the waters, Claire wavered between loyalty and ambition, knowing that whatever choice she made would alter the trajectory of her standing with both the Newmans and the Abbotts. Kyle himself, blind to the full extent of the danger Claire now represented, fumbled through tense conversations with her, every word revealing just how incapable they were of agreeing on anything, their relationship deteriorating in real time as miscommunication and mistrust poisoned every interaction. And though Kyle tried to frame their struggles as the growing pains of two strong-willed individuals, Claire quietly measured whether he was worth saving at all, or whether she should let Victor's revelation become the final nail in his coffin. At the Abbott mansion, Jack Abbott clutched the mysterious note he had received, its cryptic language gnawing at him with every passing hour, the implication of betrayal sending him spiraling into suspicion. And though he pressed Billy for answers, demanding to know if his younger brother had crossed some unseen line, Billy deflected, hiding behind charm and half-truths, too ashamed of how badly Kane had rattled him at the launch to admit that he didn't have all the answers either, leaving Jack to stew in paranoia, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios of enemies closing in on every side. While Jack spiraled, Mariah Copeland finally began to unburden herself to Tessa, her voice breaking as she described the encounter with the elderly man on her trip, The choices she had made in that moment, and the terrible consequences that followed. And though she struggled to articulate the full scope of her actions, one thing was clear. Mariah had crossed a line she had sworn she would never cross again, and now she feared that her marriage, already strained by distance, might not survive the truth, even if she believed honesty was her only path to redemption. Tessa, stunned, listened in silence, her expression shifting between heartbreak and disbelief. And though she hadn't yet decided how to respond, the confession hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst, threatening to upend not just their marriage but the stability of their family. With Aria, Nick Newman, on the other hand, continued his increasingly futile attempts to steer Phyllis Summers away from Kane's orbit, warning her again and again that Kane's latest endeavor was dangerous, that aligning herself with him could spell disaster. But Phyllis, determined as ever to seize control of her own destiny, dismissed Nick's warnings with a flippant wave, insisting she wasn't anyone's pawn, all the while quietly calculating how Kane's unpredictability might actually be used to her advantage if she played her cards right, proving once again that she preferred to act rather than react, no matter the cost. Sharon, observing Nick's distracted demeanor, grew increasingly suspicious that he was withholding something critical, and though she pressed him gently, Nick deflected, unwilling to share the full scope of his worries, a decision that only deepened the distance between them at a time when they both desperately needed allies. By the week's end, Victor Newman, ever the master strategist, had resolved outstanding issues with Michael Baldwin, their alliance once again shored up by a mutual understanding of power and necessity, and Victor moved his chess pieces with renewed vigor, tightening the net around Jack while keeping Claire on the hook with Kyle's contract violation, satisfied that the Abbotts would soon find themselves cornered. Yet Kane remained the wild card, operating outside Victor's control, forging his own path of chaos and alliance building, whispering promises to potential partners about a new dawn of influence that could rival even Newman Enterprises if they dared to join him. And through it all, Sally stood on the edge of her moral conundrum, the weight of her decision pressing down harder with each passing day, knowing that one wrong move could doom her, Billy, and Abbott Communications, yet also knowing that her survival instinct, honed through years of struggle, was screaming at her to abandon sentiment and embrace strategy, leaving her torn between who she wanted to be and who she feared she still was. While unseen in the shadows, Kane smiled to himself, fully aware that every moment of doubt, every fracture between lovers, every whispered threat, and every withheld secret only strengthened his position as Genoa City's newest power broker, the man who might not just spoil parties but orchestrate the downfall of anyone who dared to underestimate him.